Hi folks, I'm Kerry Farr. Welcome to In Your Corner. You know, it's not often that we get a show that has the lineup like we do today. On today's program, we have Pastor Bruce Maxwell of the Lake Providence Missionary Baptist Church, Nashville, Tennessee. This church was founded right after the Civil War. Pastor Maxwell started pastoring it when there were just a handful of people in 1976, and now it's a mega church in Nashville, Tennessee. In addition to that, we have, believe it or not, former Tennessee Titans football star Chris Sanders on the program today. So stick around and hear these amazing stories on today's edition of In Your Corner. Hi folks, I'm Kerry Farr. Welcome to In Your Corner. Hey, on today's program, we're going to go back in history 100 years, and we're going to talk with Pastor Bruce Maxwell, who is the pastor of one of the largest African American congregations here in Nashville, Tennessee. He pastors Lake Providence Baptist Church, which has been in existence since 1868. So we're going to talk about Pastor Maxwell's story, but also the history of this amazing church. Pastor Maxwell, so good to see you on the program today.
Good to have me. I'm glad you're having me on your program.
Good to see you. Pastor, take us back. You know, you and I were talking about slavery and the freeing of the slaves back in the 1860s and the Emancipation Proclamation and what happened with the churches. Then kind of take us back and give us a little history lesson.
A little bit of history lesson. In those days, before the Emancipation Proclamation or the freeing of the slaves, what actually took place was that most churches, Baptist churches, which were predominantly white, they did have a balcony in the church, and that was the area as to where Negroes worshiped. They also had the slave masters' children with them, which they took to the balcony with them because they were in direct care of the persons who were in the big house serving the slaves that served the big house. So the split out of the African American church actually came out of the white church itself, the white Baptist church. So when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, there were African American churches in small pockets of the county and of the community and of the city also that actually came into being.
Wow. And so we're talking about Nashville, Tennessee, and of course part of the Confederacy. And so during that time, I guess after the Civil War, I think it ended in 1864, Lake Providence Baptist Church was founded as a missionary Baptist church as opposed to a Southern Baptist church. And you were telling me the distinction a little earlier.
The distinction was the reason why Missionary Baptist Church was attached to the name of most of them was to give them a separate identity from what is known as the Southern Baptist Church today.
Now, the Southern Baptist, I guess because they wanted a separate identity, was because the Southern Baptist Church embraced slavery, I suppose, during that time.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. Even with, if you look at both sides of the coin, the Baptist, Southern Baptist churches, as well as Methodist churches, what is known as the United Methodist Church actually embraced slavery. And the Wesleyan Methodist Church broke away, and there was a split among Methodists, and the Wesleyans did not embrace the idea of slavery.
Yeah. And so after the slaves were freed, then Lake Providence was founded as a small, I'm sure, small congregation in 1868. And so kind of take us, you know, what's happened. I know you weren't here, but in 100 years, your church has grown tremendously.
It has grown tremendously. We've been blessed with where the church actually serves not only the Davidson County area, but a lot of the people coming from Rutherford County, Williamson County, and even as far away as Murray County. We have people who drive from all over the city to attend Lake Providence, and we're very happy to see the growth that has occurred through the years.
Well, you've got a beautiful church. I've been to your church several times. A beautiful, beautiful building, and of course, you've pastored it for 30-odd years.
Yes.
You know, Pastor, let me ask you this. You believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that Jesus is the mediator between God and man and the only way to heaven?
Is through Christ.
Is through Christ. You know, some years ago, I was witnessing to an African-American friend of mine who had become a Muslim. And I was telling him about Jesus Christ. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me.
Most certainly.
And he said to me, he said, well, that's white man's religion. How do we, how do you, explain something like that as a pastor?
I think what has happened through years of actually seeing the church and actually watching as to what has happened within the church, African American as well as the white church, we have not seen either one of us, and I don't lay it totally African American or white culture. I don't lay the blame either way, but neither one of us, in the capacity in which we have actually embraced the idea of the concept of the Great Commission, nor the teachings of Christ. We see a distinction, and racism is something that will always be prevalent. And what has happened to a lot of African American men who have been drawn into the Muslim religion, or Islam as it is called, I think they have embraced it because of the fact Islam embraces a variety of people of different races, creeds, and colors, just as what we have seen here now with the bombing that took place in Boston. The gentleman that that is arrested now, and his brother who was killed, they were from the Russian area, and that area is a predominantly white area, from my understanding of the geography and the people who live there. So you have a man who is from Russia, as well as one who is from India, or the continent of Africa, or down in the Philippines, or wherever, where the Muslim religion is embraced. And all of these people come together with one common purpose in mind in studying the Quran, and they embrace one another as far as the ideas are concerned as to what the Quran actually embraced. But we actually do know that there are factions as far as the Muslim religion is concerned, as to where it is radical, as to where people have embraced ideas of men and not what the Quran is actually saying.
Right, and so I guess if I read between the lines, what you're saying is because the church in America, and we've got to go to a commercial in just a moment, we'll pick up on this when we come back.
Yes.
But the church, and maybe I should say the white church, did not receive our African American brothers.
Yes.
And so they turned to a false religion, a false God, and did not serve the true and living God. And folks, I want you to know, as you can look at me and see I'm a white man, gray-headed, but I am of the opinion that Jesus Christ loves you regardless of your race, creed, or color.
Amen.
We sang the song, Pastor, when we were children. Red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in His sight. And friend, I don't care what ethnicity you are, I don't care what your background is, Jesus Christ loves you and wants to save your soul. And you're welcome to come to Jesus Christ today. Just give your life to Him and ask Him to come into your heart. But we'll be back with Pastor Bruce Maxwell in just a moment. Hello, my friend. Are you a speaker? Are you a preacher? Are you an evangelist? Do you get opportunities to speak in front of a crowd every now and then, but you don't have a tool to use? You don't have something that really emphasizes your message, your story, your faith, the way you would like for it to? Have you ever thought about telling your story in the form of a book? Let me tell you what having your own book will do for you. It will get you more speaking engagements. You will be known as an authority. Radio and television and print media will call you and interview you. It will give you an extra stream of income. And book writing is something that is so simple today that even an old boxing coach like me can do it. You see, I've published 8 books, and I teach the workshop, Create Your Own Book, this weekend, and I want to help you put your message in the form of a book so that when you go somewhere to speak, you have a book to sell in the back of the room. Or maybe you have a business. A book today can be your business card. You can write a book, my friend, and buy physical copies of that book sometimes for as little as $1.50 or $2.50. And that is a very impressive business card. I want to help you put your story on pages, on paper, and get it into the form of a book so that you have a tool to use. Go to our website, createyourownbookthisweekend.com. Folks, we're back with Pastor Bruce Maxwell. And Pastor, before we went to the break, we were talking about so many young African Americans embracing Islam, and you said that their roots could be traced back to a Black Baptist church somewhere.
Most certainly. You have a lot of the young people, African American males, especially, who have embraced Islam. And what takes place is their roots trace back to a mom or grandmom or great-grandmom. These people who are actively involved or have been actively involved for years inside of a Baptist church or a Christian church. I won't just say a Baptist church, but from the standpoint of view of the Presbyterian church or the United Methodist Church, Primitive Baptist churches, their roots trace back into the church, but somehow they were led astray. And in them being led astray, to see something now as to where they've got Islam, who embraces all races, that has never been the concept, hardly in the South, as to where you see the African American church or the white Baptist church, either one, embrace people as a whole, and then really act out the commands of Jesus to love your neighbor as thyself.
Right.
It's just not a concept that the church has actually embraced.
And we should be embracing it.
We should.
Yeah. Wow.
With the prison population as it's growing, and things that are happening, and a lot of times inside of prisons, I mean, even with the prison ministry that we have, as well as I think some of those that are members of our church who are employed with the prison system, what is taking place is the fact that the Muslims that are inside of the prison are actually indoctrinating the young African American men that are coming in, and they embrace them, and actually what they are receiving
is love.
They're receiving love, and then they're receiving protection. Inside of the prison, they're receiving protection from some of these guys so that they are not raped or anything like that. And you hear those testimonies on a continual basis. Sometimes when you go there and you're intermingling and talking with some of the prisoners and all, I've heard that so many times.
Wow. Pastor, how can we, our ministry of In Your Corner is basically transitioning. We want to, as a television ministry, we also want to have a teaching ministry where we can go out and take, empower people that are sitting on the bench, so to speak, to get in the game and win these young men, whether they be black or white or whatever the case may be. How can we enable, I'm talking about good enabling, empower people that are sitting on the sidelines that have gifts and have talents to get them involved in ministry today?
I think that what we have to do is redirect the focus of young people that way, and from a church leadership standpoint of view of those who we have that have been in the church for years, not to become so judgmental at the first outset of when those young people enter the church. One of the styles in this day and time, and we all look at it and we see it, and some of us can't stand it, is the sagging pants.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we can't be judgmental when they first come to the congregation.
You got to give them some time.
You got to give them time, and you got to train them and teach them how to become respectable young men and women. And that's where it takes the elders of the church being patient. We got to remember, we went through our styles too at that age.
Yes.
I mean, when I was their age, the teenagers, the afros were extremely popular. And believe me, there's some pictures that I hope nobody pulled. And every now and then I got one of the deacons of the church, he's always pulling out old photos. And I tell him, I'm gonna burn your photo album. You know, but when I had the huge afro and all. But we went through those times also. And those were the times that we went through in our styles and things that we embraced at that time, the disco and all that type of thing that we've got to remember. We had our day also. And so somebody was patient with me.
Right.
And just like they were patient with me, now I have moved to the position of that person that was patient with me when I was at that age. And I've got to be patient with them.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed that amazing interview with Pastor Maxwell today. Be sure and tune in next week where we'll give you the second half of Pastor Maxwell's story. I want you to stick around and see this amazing interview that we had with former NFL football star Chris Sanders of the Tennessee Titans a couple of years ago. In this interview, Chris and I talked about the tragic death of quarterback Steve McNair. And Chris shared his insight on that terrible event and what he would have done if he had the chance to go back and talk to McNair before this tragedy. Stick around and hear this amazing story coming up next on In Your Corner. If you're anything like me, a dreamer, when I was playing high school football, I dreamed about playing in a stadium like LP Field. And I wasn't big enough, I wasn't fast enough like 98% of the rest of America. But there was a gentleman by the name of Chris Sanders that not only played on this field, but caught touchdowns on this very field behind us, played in the Super Bowl, caught touchdown passes from quarterback Steve McNair. Today on In Your Corner, Chris talks about his football career and his relationship with the quarterback, Steve McNair. We're joined on In Your Corner today by former NFL player Chris Sanders. Chris,
that makes me sound old.
Saying former?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
You were with the Tennessee Titans.
Yes, I played for 8 years. I got drafted in 1995. You know, we were known as the Houston Oilers then, and I think it was 1997 to 98. That's when we became the Tennessee Titans, and it was a great transition. I mean, I was one of those guys that was just excited to play in the NFL. We could have played in somebody's backyard. I was just excited just to play in the NFL.
How does somebody make it into the NFL? There's such a small percentage.
Small. It's 1%. I mean, 1% of people in the world make it in the NFL, so you're going against the elite people every week. So
3rd and 6. Here comes the blitz. McNair gets the pass away for a first down. Chris Sanders down the sidelines, and Sanders dives in for the touchdown.
I would visualize myself catching the ball in an NFL game, and I would just pray and say, God, you know, one day I want to play in the NFL. And God was so funny that he answered my prayers in 1995. And it's funny because I have a picture of me catching my first touchdown in this exact same way that I was catching the sock as a young kid. So it's funny just to say that.
You were visualizing it when you were a young man.
Yeah.
What does it take to become, well, I suppose even a Division I college football player takes a lot of talent, doesn't it?
It takes a lot. I mean, you got to stay focused. I mean, you got to be athletic because, you know, in your town, you're the best in your town. But you got to remember, when you go to a college, they're the best of the best. So, you know, it's going to take hard work and, you know, willing to do the little things that a lot of people don't want to do. I heard a quote from Jerry Rice that said this. It says, "I do what others won't do today so that I can accomplish what others can accomplish tomorrow." And sometimes it takes that. I mean, it takes working out and, you know, not wanting to quit and all that stuff that goes on. But it was a blessing to make it.
Well, yeah, that's something that kids dream of.
Man.
And I knew when I was in junior high school and high school, I wasn't going to be big enough or fast enough. What does it, if there's a young man out there that has talent, Chris, what would you say to him to do to try and make it into the league?
See, the thing about it is, it's not about how big you are. It's about how big a heart you have.
Yeah.
It's not about, there's a quote that I say, it's not the size of the ship, it's the motion of the ocean.
Amen.
You know, it's one of my favorite players that I played with a while ago named Derrick Mason, probably the smallest receiver in the NFL. But the one thing that I love is he has a tenacity and he has a heart to be the best. And that's what it takes. I mean, you gotta do the little things, work hard, listen to your parents, listen to your coaches, do all those things to become the great player that you can.
Yeah, and you were Ohio State.
The Ohio State.
The Ohio State. Did you play for Woody Hayes? Or?
No, I ain't that old. No, I played for John Cooper. I played for him for 4 years, and he was one of the best coaches I've ever had. And we had some great times there.
Well, it's a great college. And of course, you were wide receiver in the NFL?
Yes.
And you played with Eddie George and Steve McNair.
Yes, me and Eddie George played at Ohio State together also, and then I'm a year in front of him, and then he came that next year, but we played together for 7 or 8 years, and just watching this guy play he was one of the best players I've ever seen.
And you guys were in the Super Bowl.
There's another dream that came to pass, just you know, watching one of my dreams being fulfilled. And we made it in 1999, and the year before that we were 7-9. So to come back that next year and make it into the Super Bowl and play the St. Louis Rams was probably one of the best dreams come true that I've ever had.
Yeah, and you guys were so close.
Oh, 1 yard short.
Winning that game.
It was close, but you know, as I look at the whole scenario, yeah, we lost the game, but I actually won because, you know, there's a lot of guys that play in the NFL that never made the Super Bowl. And I have a chance to tell people that I made it into the Super Bowl.
You were in the Super Bowl.
In the Super Bowl and
yes,
actually
sir.
played in a game that people dream to play in. So I'm not sad. I'm excited because I can tell people that one of my dreams came true.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, we mentioned Steve McNair, and what a great player, but what a tragic story. What can you tell us about him and his life and the tragedy that happened there?
On the football side, this guy was a warrior. I mean, I watched this guy in the huddle to where his fingers was broke, his sternum was hurting real bad, 2 ankles hurting, but this guy did everything it took to win. I mean, he had a heart like a lion. He'll run into a brick wall and come back the next play and make plays. You know, on the personal side, you know, just like I said before, I'm sorry. If I can ever see him again, I would like to say I'm sorry because I focus so much on him being a football player as opposed to just telling him about his life and helping him in his life. And, you know, I apologize to him for doing that.
Because you didn't help him overcome
some
of the things that he was going through.
I mean, I never had a chance to really speak into his life. You know, we talked X's and O's and, you know, run this post and run this slant route, but I never really talked about life skills of life. And, you know, we focus so much on that as players, but we never deal with the personal side because we think it's vulnerable if we open ourselves up to another guy.
And men are like that, aren't they? They're afraid to ask for help.
It is. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're soft or weak. That means that you're smart because you need help. And, you know, I thank God for Jesus so much because he saw me at my weakest stage and he stepped out of eternity and met me where I was at. So I'm so thankful for that.
Well, you're talking about your faith, and we'll go back there in a minute because you have an amazing story of coming to Christ.
Yes.
But, you know, right now, take us into that NFL huddle
Okay.
where you're getting ready to run around. What is Steve McNair saying to you and Eddie George when you're in the huddle? Of course, there's not a lot of time.
I mean, just like I said, Steve McNair, he's calling the plays, and he's telling me, Chris, look at the defense, watch the safety and all that stuff like that. But when he's calling the play, my heart jumps because I'm nervous. I'm like, okay, I got to get in the right spot. I got to make a play. But it's a situation to where it's intense in the huddle and also on the field. So it's something that's really fun.
Yeah. What's the difference in playing in NFL and playing in, let's say, high school? Is it size? Is it speed?
It's everybody's fast. I mean, even the mascots are fast. I mean, I mean, everybody's fast. I mean, you got guys like Ray Lewis, that's a linebacker that's running 4.5, 4.6s that, opposed to back in the day, they're running 5 flats. Every position is fast. You got offensive linemen, rush ends that are just as fast as receivers now. So that's the difference between high school, college, and the NFL.
Yeah. Well, a moment ago, you mentioned your faith in Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you were sorry because you didn't say something to Steve McNair, who lost his life in that tragic shooting accident. Tell us how you came to know Christ.
In 1995, there was two coaches, Les Steckel and Sherman Smith. Les Steckel was my receiver coach, and Sherman Smith was the running back coach. And they saw my life. They knew that I was a great football player, but they knew that something was missing. And I was one of those guys that would pound my chest and point to the sky and say, I like the Jesus Christ and Lord and Savior of my life. But then they looked at my life and it wasn't consistent to what I was saying. So I remember one time I went to go speak to a youth group, and I'm not even saved.
Right, yeah.
And Les Steckel and Sherman Smith came up to me and they said, how are you going to speak to these guys and your life is not adding up to what you're saying? And from that day on, Les Steckel and Sherman Smith sat me down and said, if you keep living the life that you're living, you're going to end up in destruction. And I said, Lord, what do I do to be saved? And they led me to the Lord, and the sky was the limit for me.
Amen. Well, folks, we'll be back in just a minute. Folks, be sure to tune in next week and hear the rest of former Tennessee Titans football star Chris Sanders' amazing story. Hello, my friend. Some time ago, God impressed upon my heart that I needed to take the things that I had learned in the way of publishing and sharing my faith through media and teach those to the body of Christ. And I want to teach you how to write your book, how to share your faith, how to share your message with the world. I want to invite you to our next Create Your Own Book This Weekend workshop. It's a Saturday morning workshop that's held in a city near you. It's only 3 hours long, usually from 9 to 12. And in that time, you will learn how to write your book in a weekend and to get it published in just a few days. Hey, it's not that difficult. You can publish your book at Kindle Direct Publishing and upload your manuscript in just a matter of minutes. Did you know that you can also write a book that's only 24 pages long and publish it on CreateSpace, which is a print book company owned by Amazon? It's so easy to publish your story today. And I want to help you get your story out. I want to help you share your faith and change the world. Go to our website right now, createyourownbookthisweekend.com, and register for our next workshop.